So to begin playing the Seventh Continent, you kind of need to know how a turn works. And turns are very easy in this game. There's only 3 things that happen on a turn. The first thing is you choose who is the active player. So there's no order to this. You just pick somebody who's the active player. The second thing you do is check for any characters that are going to be involved with the action that the active player is going to do.
Right.
And then the third thing is to take an action.
Right. So that might sound a little bit weird, but once you play a little bit, you'll realize that it kind of makes sense, because you will make decisions on like who's the active person based on what you're trying to do, and also where you are on the map, because at some point if somebody wants to take control of the turn and they want to go a different way, you guys can always choose to like stay where you are or do something different. So it actually works real well. It sounds kind of weird, but it works fine. The other thing that we will tell you is that, again, for probably the millionth time during the recording, we're trying to give you the least spoilers, at least during explanation, that we can. You know, and if you don't care about that, certainly watch the playthrough. But as of right now, you are going to see some cards just so that we can explain to you how they work. But we are going to try our best to keep this section of the game just to get you going.
Yeah.
And you will see a couple things. We don't think that it would be any, you know, big spoiler for you. And as a matter of fact, we probably won't read a lot of the cards. We're just going to show you what happens when you acquire them, because then you'll have most of the surprise. But you should have, by the time this section is done, should have a good idea of what's going on.
Right. So the first thing we need to talk about are actions.
Right.
So, Mickey, what does an action look like? I guess I'm popping it up on the screen right now so they can see it.
So,
what does it consist of?
So an action consists of a white box, one of these where I'm pointing, and these, and these. Okay. So any of these white boxes that have the blue diamond and then a star after them, they are some sort of action. We are not going to read down the incredibly long list of all the actions there are in this game, because that's silly.
Yeah.
You can figure it out for yourself. Actually, most of them kind of, you know, they kind of make sense. But anyways, so whoever's the active player will decide, hey, I'm going to do this one, this one, this one, or this one.
The places you can find actions, if you're looking on the board right now, there's the terrain tiles that we're standing on.
Right, so wherever you're standing, so those are accessible.
Then there's the ones on the exploration cards.
Right, so these are kind of considered attached, so to speak. So there's an attachment card and then these exploration cards. But the main key are these arrows. So if these arrows are pointing, that means you can kind of see over into this area and you can do whatever you can like see onto the card. So in this case, that means I'm allowed to do this action, or I'm allowed to do this action, as well as the actions that are on the card that we're both standing on.
And then there's a few other places that actions can occur. As Mickey already said, permanent cards, which would be next to terrain tiles. There's sometimes actions there. Sometimes there's event cards that have actions.
Right.
There's cards in your hand that have actions. What is it?
Item cards that have actions. See, that most of the item cards have an action that let you make them or actually create the item.
So actions, whenever you see that group, the white box, the blue diamond, and the gold star, that's an action. One thing to note about actions is that you cannot do an action while another action is in progress. You have to finish
the entire action.
Yeah.
Right. One other thing to remember is that when at the beginning of your turn, when you decide if you're going to participate with the active player or not, you literally can help the player. You know, of course, you have to be on the same spot as they are, but you can help them do anything.
Yep.
Like literally anything in the game. If you decide that you're gonna, what do they call it in the game?
Become involved?
You can become involved. If you're going to be involved in that series, then you can help.
And the active player actually has the final say on who can be involved. So if you guys are being jerks to someone and they're like, I'm going to do this action, they're like, no, you can't join in. But it's a co-op game.
Yeah,
so.
It's not really a good idea to do that in this game unless you're really... I don't know. We haven't played the whole game, so who knows? Maybe there are times when you're like, no, you can't play. I don't know.
And then there are a couple things that appear next to actions.
Here's a picture of the lock.
The red lock and the red stairs. The one with the red stairs means that all players have to be involved in that action in order for you to take it.
The lock is locking in the number of cards that you have to play, and then there's a red burst around a white thing, and that means that everybody, the active player and everybody involved, must do that immediately after whatever you're doing is done. But you have to do that. You don't have a choice.
That is what I have for action, just actions in general. In the book, there are percentages on how successful resolving an action is. So
based on the number of cards you pick, there is a chart. Yeah.
All right, so let's get into resolving an action. So the first thing you're going to do is you declare what action you want to pick. So, Mickey, you're on the board, so I'll let you pick an action.
Okay, so I'm going to say that I want to check out that card. And this is, I think they call it the little polls they called Pathfind or Escape is what they call that. Which, like I said, doesn't really make a difference. You know what it means. So, literally, it has a 0 cost and you have to get 0 successes. So, if you don't want to draw any cards, you just do what it says. Flip the card over, because there's not even a penalty. You just always succeed on this particular card. But since it does have the plus, say I didn't have any cards in my hand, I could indeed pick from the action deck if I want to. Remember, but that's my life, so it's kind of a hit or miss. So in this case, I'm just not going to do that right now.
When you do an action, you declare the action, then you determine the cost, which Mickey was saying, what's in the blue diamond. You have to determine how many cards you're going to draw. So in this case, he said he's not drawing any, and then you resolve it. So.
Right. But if it did have a 2 in it, then I would have to draw at least 2.
A 2 plus, right?
Right. Because you can always go more to make your odds of success better.
But the key thing is, the more cards you take from the deck, the more life you're taking.
You're taking. So. And also don't forget that if for some reason this had a super high cost, there are cards in the game that you will acquire that can let you manipulate how many cards that you can take.
And that's where the lock comes in, because you can't
manipulate that. And there's also the mechanic that says you can lower the card count but up the successes if you want to. Hopefully that makes sense. Anyhow, so
I'll let Mickey continue taking his action. I shouldn't have interrupted.
All right. So there.
So you succeeded.
Now,
that was the
right.
first
I was
thing, right?
succeeded. I flipped the card, and then I would read all this. We won't spoil the card for you, but you will notice that, so once I flip this card and read what happens, you'll notice that on this card here, it has that white symbol with a burst around it. So whatever this card is, I have to do this next. Okay?
If you move your hand a bit, in the top left, there's an hourglass, and that means it resolves instantly.
Yep. So then I would do this, and if I fail, I read this part, and if I succeed, I read this part, and then I do what the card says. In any event, let's assume that I did all this, then this card goes away into the past, because it's an explore card, not an action card. And I look here, and that tells me what card goes there next. Unless for some reason this overrode it, but it didn't. And this says 009. At that point, I would go into the box, I would look for 009, green first, and if there was no greens, then I would be allowed to put a gold. And then I take that card, read the flavor text on the back because it's fun, and then you put that card in this place. And most likely, it will be another piece of the continent, and that's how you start revealing the land around you.
Alright, so that was Mickey's turn. We're not putting the number 9 down because
We don't, like I said, we don't want to get very much of this.
So next, it's another turn. So either Mickey could go again or I could go, but I'm going to be a little greedy and I'm going to take an action. So I am going to explore that exploration tile up top, and instead of 0, I want to draw 2 cards.
Alright.
And Mickey's like, why are you killing us, Jeb?
Yeah.
Okay, so I determined the cost, which I'm saying is 2. And then now we're going to check the results to see if I succeeded. So
he would go 1, 2.
Yep.
And then he would reveal those one at a time, technically. Even though that when you play the game, you're just going to reveal the stuff. Oh, and look at that. Jeb got, he revealed 2 items. Remember, he doesn't need any successes.
Yeah.
So he just gets, so right now, the way that it works is the active player gets to choose a card to keep. And he can keep that for himself, or he could give it to another involved player. Jeb didn't ask me if I wanted to be involved. He just said, I'm exploring, because he's rude.
So that means I'm going to get to keep one of the cards. But before I actually take a card up, I need to determine if I was successful. And to do that, we need to count the number of successes on the cards.
Right.
And as you can see, I placed 1, so it kind of, the left-hand side shows where all the successes are. And as you can see, there was a 7, a star, and then 2 halves of stars.
Right, so that's half, but he
which
slid them
actually
together,
form.
and he was able to make 3 stars out of those 2 cards, which, if you pulled that in a game, that's fantastic.
But it's not fantastic against the 0 success.
It really
actually.
isn't. But he did get some nifty items that he can choose from, so that's good.
So,
if you don't remember what the lucky 7 is for, if you are using a card that has that has a star with a 7 inside, and a 7's revealed, then it counts as a success.
Yep.
Okay?
So before I actually resolve the action, I get to now take one of these cards and put them in my hand. So I think I'm going to take I'll take the blowpipe. So let's pretend my hand's over here. That
is an action card, so that actually goes into the discard pile. Which, if you have, you have the little nifty little case, it goes in face up like that, and there you go.
All right, and then now I would resolve the rest of that action, which is flip this.
Literally flip it over.
And
look at that.
another hourglass, another mandatory action.
Another mandatory thing. He has to do that. This card will go away after he does all the stuff. And then notice that it says 007. Go into the box. Find the 007 green card if there's a green card. Yellow if there's none left. And place it here. And now you've actually developed 2 more pieces of the continent.
I'm going to take the next action, and we're going to pretend the action deck is just 1 card. So I'm taking this action that is a 1+. So I'm going to take 2 cards. And what would I do for that, Mickey? How would I resolve that action?
Okay, so if he does that, we're getting into the danger zone. Alright.
I'll put the discard right there so you guys can see that.
What would happen is, first of all, he wouldn't do this. But
yeah,
if he did,
I would definitely not do this. But
he would draw the 1 card, and then you go to the discard pile, and you shuffle it up. Okay. And then now it is in here face down.
It's a discard deck.
It's a discard deck now. And then you continue drawing from the discard deck, although you need to remember which card is which in this case. So he would probably reveal this first so that he knows what it is. Then he would probably keep this a little separated so that he knows. Because once you're drawing from the discard deck, if you reveal a curse, game over.
Yep. That's the danger of the
Right.
discard deck.
So if he kept drawing, and I know there's one in here somewhere. So if for some reason Jeb flipped over that card on that reveal,
Game over.
Everybody's dead. We're dead. Done.
All because of Jeb.
Right. But that's how the mechanic of when you run out is. Now, you might be saying, well, geesh, that's pretty harsh, you know. But there are mechanics in the game that help you get cards back into the deck. So the second that you get cards back...
Well, hold on a sec. So after I do this, I would take one of the cards, put it in my hand, if I wanted to.
Only if that's his guy.
That is not my guy, so I'm taking this one. All right. So the card that would be discarded, since there's no discard now, it actually goes into the discard deck and it gets shuffled.
The way that the when you're drawing from this, the way that the rules worded is you're always drawing randomly. So this is constantly getting shuffled. Technically, since it does say random, I guess you could be like, I'm taking this card, because honestly it really wouldn't matter.
Right.
So you do it however you want. Probably off the top of the deck is the easiest once you've shuffled it, though. Just remember that it's constantly going to be shuffled.
And that was a good point, that I could not pick up one of the action cards that have somebody else's face on it. Those are character specific.
Yep.
So, Mickey, what was the other thing you wanted to say about the discard deck?
All I was going to say is that at any point in the game when it tells you to get cards back, normally it'll be like...
Yeah, let's say we got 5 cards back.
So it says, oh, you get 5 cards back, put them into the deck. So you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I randomly got 5 cards. I shuffle them up. I make a stack, and then boom, the discard pile flips back over.
And you're back
so
in
now
safer
it's
territory.
now you've got 5 cards to play with before you're in the danger zone again.
Yeah. And I actually didn't resolve that action I took, but it doesn't matter because there was a success of 0, so I passed anyway. So after that happens...
So in this case, this says go get the 005 card, and we don't know what's going to go there.
Something might go there, something might just...
Who knows
resolve.
what it is.
Yeah, we don't know.
So that's basically how you start getting around the continent. And like I said, you'll start forming a land, and you'll have things that you have to do and obstacles you might have to go through. All the cards I shouldn't say all because I haven't seen all the cards because there's over 1,000 of them. But the majority of the terrain cards have some kind of movement action, okay, with the arrows, and they tell you what direction you go in. I mean, I'm assuming that they may put some in that only let you go north, only let you go south, whatever. The point is that it tells you how much it's going to cost you to move, how many successes you need to move. Once you do that, of course you have to have a piece of land that you can see to move into, but if you pay for the cost, then you literally just take your figure and move it, and everyone that was involved in that action goes with you. So to be efficient, you don't want... Well, actually, they kind of made a rule so that you don't have to burn all the time if somebody wants to stay. But for the most part, then that guy could go over there if he paid the one cost, moved, and then he would be able to do all the actions that were in this card. We haven't seen a character card that doesn't have it, but most character cards have something that say it costs 1 less card to move to a space that has fire or another character. So if I didn't go with, say, Jeb this turn, my card right here says it cost me 1 less, and I could basically go for free over to where Jeb was, or if there was a fire. And don't forget that applies to anywhere that is connected. So as long as there's not an interruption in cards, meaning like there's a barrier or something, I could go 3 cards away and not have to spend anything. I hope that made sense. That pretty much covers the stuff that you can do on the board. Now, as when Jeb picked this card, when he did the one action that he did, this is actually in his hand at this point.
Yep.
Okay? So to get this into play, Jeb would have to be the active player, and he would say, on my turn, I am going to craft a blowpipe. And then he does this action up here, and if he succeeds, which since there's a 0 there, he's going to succeed, he would place that in front of him, and then this dice is the number of uses, and then you just take a die and put it in the corner there, and then every time he uses that to perform the hunting action, I think that's hunting,
Yeah.
then he would just lower it by 1. Now, important thing to remember about this is these resources that lower the number of cards that you can pick, they do not have to be present. You can, on anything that you build, all the materials don't have to be present. They just help a lot if they are.
Yeah.
So
this land has stone as its resource,
right.
So that's the only thing. And what do we need for the blowpipe?
This one looks like a piece of bamboo.
Okay, so we have no bamboo on this tile, but I can still make the blowpipe.
Right.
But if I had bamboo?
If he had bamboo, it wouldn't even cost him any cards to build. So basically thematically, bamboo's not plentiful. Right. So he had to expel a lot of energy trying to find something that he could make a blowpipe out of.
Yeah.
Whereas if he was in, if he was in Panda Land, he would probably be able to find a piece of bamboo.
No, Panda would have eaten it all.
Oh, okay. That would have been Jeb's luck. But anyways, so don't forget, that's how you you do an action from your hand, so to speak. You just lay it down, do the same thing, and now Jeb would have this ability going forward, so if he performed the hunting action, he could spend a pip and automatically have 2 successes. Yep. That's how that works.
So when I was talking about performing an action, before you actually determine the cost, you're supposed to choose any items, or I guess there are some cards, like some tile cards that have these brown boxes.
Right.
You declare all that stuff before you start drawing cards, and then you get their effect. So like, if I use the blowpipe, like Mickey said, if it's a hunting action, I could knock that down to a 2, and then it gives me 2 automatic successes on the action that I'm performing.
Right. So we backtracked a little bit because we wanted to show you how to get an item and then how to make an item, and Jeb just explained to you that at the beginning you have to make the choices on everything you're going to use
before you take that.
All the manipulations you're going to do to the cards and the success requirements and all that kind of stuff, and then you go for it.
Yeah.
Okay, so now that you have the general idea of the way the game is going to progress, and we've already showed you some of these things, but Jeb's going to read all the majority of things that could happen when you take an action, and we will try to elaborate without giving anything away, and hopefully you'll understand what we're talking about in case you haven't already seen it yet.
Yeah. So one of the biggest things that can happen as a result of an action is that you have to take a card from the adventure deck that has a number.
Right. Which is, like I already explained to you before, once those Explore cards went away and we resolved it, I would go into the box, look for 009, reveal it, and then perhaps it would be a piece of the continent, and I would put it down, or perhaps it would be something else.
Right. And then when you look for that number, you always go for the green first.
Which I've mentioned.
If there's multiple green, it doesn't matter. You just pick one of them. And then if there's no green, then you take the gold. If no cards available, immediately return all cards in the past back to their decks.
Right. So if for some reason there was no 009 in there, you'd basically, for lack of a better term, you would reset the game with all the cards that you could. Yeah. Because remember, some cards are going to be banished. So the game did a good job of making sure that, you can't get back to information that would be stupid to get back to.
Right. And then once you get the card, you're going to read the back, like Mickey said, and it may give a clue about it.
Right.
So some of the things that can come up from getting an adventure card, or a card from the adventure deck, a terrain tile. What would you do if you got it?
So a terrain tile would be placed, for example, if the 007 I picked was a terrain tile, it would go right there, orientated in the same direction. The other card will tell you if you got it right or not, basically.
If you can read the numbers on here and you can't read the numbers, then you need to turn it around. So
There's something, right.
Yeah. One key thing about placing the terrain tile, figures are not automatically moved onto it. A lot of board games have it where you explore a new tile, you automatically move on. This game does not do that.
Right. So when you're looking through one of these foggy things and you do this action, basically you've just gotten to the edge close enough so that you can see in, or maybe you placed your foot in, but until you use that move action, you don't go to a new space.
Yep. All right. So say instead of a terrain tile, we got a permanent event.
Okay. So a permanent event, if I can see if I can find an example for you guys, just so you know. Okay, so I'm going to kind of cover the card a little bit so you don't see what it is. But so this would be an example of a permanent event. Notice the arrow. It's got some cool stuff there. But this would be placed by one of the edges, depending on where you found it.
The arrow has to point to the tile.
The arrow has to point to the tile, and the arrow has important information because it tells you what action was used to reveal this card. And that's very important because that action can't be used again. So whatever's on this arrow, whatever action's on this arrow can't be used again. And then that card exists. It's basically considered an extension of this tile. So if this was the tile that was here, I would be able to do anything on this card, up to not being able to do it anymore, like the card telling me that you're done.
And the permanent cards, you can't move on to them. They're not terrain.
Right, they're not terrain.
All right, another thing that you could get is a temporary event, which we've already kind of showed you. It's the ones with the hourglass.
Right, so the instant thing. And if after you're done with that, like say we showed you both of these spots had one, and if after you were done with it, it didn't tell you to pull any more cards out of the box, then you look at the card that the terrain card is telling you to pick.
All right, another thing that you can get is an item. And when you get an item, it doesn't go to your hand. It automatically gets built, or it gets placed in your inventory.
So here's an example of an item that you might find in the thing. Notice that it has the die pip thing in the opposite corner, and it has no skill to make it. So you found this on the island, and you can just have it. But you do have to pay attention to the item limits and stacking limits that you have during the game, which again, if you don't remember, are on the satchel based on the number of players, because those items do count towards that.
Another card that you can get is a quest item, and what that does, it just goes right under the satchel.
Okay. So a quest item, and this really doesn't give anything away. During the quest you might find some experience points. But the key to it is a quest item has that little book up in the corner.
Another thing you can get is a skill or bonus card, and that's pretty much, it has a blue or a red hand in the top left, and it just goes to your hand.
Right, so a skill is a blue hand, and a bonus is a green hand.
Oh, sorry, yeah, not red. I said red.
You shouldn't say red, Jeb, because
red
those
means
are bad.
I'm dead.
Those are bad.
That is actually the next thing. It's a state card.
Right,
if you get a state card, that also goes to your hand. So if you get a red, a blue, or a green hand on a card, it goes to your hand.
Right. Red's bad.
Yes.
And don't forget, if you do get one of those red cards, don't forget that you have to resolve
whatever.
well,
If it has that
if
burst.
it has the blue the blue diamond with an X through it, you have to remember to do the discard from the action deck if necessary.
Another thing that can happen from an action is discarding a card, and what that is just like it sounds, the active player must immediately discard a card to the discard or the pass, depending on what kind of card it is.
Right.
And then another result could be banishing a card, which is putting the card in the banish pile.
And that's out of the game.
Yes. And then there are some cards that actually have the a symbol of like a green tile with an arrow pointing to a gold tile. And in that case, you actually banish the green tile and replace it with the gold tile. So,
anyways, there's a little key up in the corner. From this is this is gray and green, but there's also a gold and green, or a green to gold, and that's a banish reminder. Basically, the cards tell you to banish them too, but there's just like there's all kinds of nice little reminders in this game of stuff that you're supposed to do.
All right. Returning a card, what you do is just place the card back in the original deck. So if you return a card that's an action card, it goes back to the action deck. Or if you return a card from the adventure deck, it goes back to the adventure deck.
In the spot where you found it, obviously. Like if the card told you to return and it was card number 8, you'd go to the box, put it back in the 8 section. That's what return means. Pretty easy.
Sometimes an action will result in you lowering the item durability. So if you have to lower an item by 2 pips, or the result says it's like a minus and 2 pips on a die. What you would do is, like, if we only had a blue pipe, we would
I'd have to put this down to 1. Now remember that usually in those cases it can be if people were involved and you got it as a group, you could spread it among everybody's items so that something really, really good maybe doesn't take such a hit, and you guys could eliminate something that wasn't so good. But in
you can also split it amongst your own.
Yeah, you can split it amongst your own, but just remember that you can also, assuming they were involved in the action, that other people can help you absorb the amount of reduction you have to do to your items.
And another result could be moving a character, and that's just moving as indicated, like following the normal rules.
Yep, tell it where.
And then there are some that say take a card from the adventure deck. It just literally says get whatever card and put it there.
And it'll tell you it's there. It's real good about telling you exactly what to do.
All right, that's everything I got for consequences of actions. Okay, so let's talk about the life force real quick. We've already said some stuff about it, but we'll go over it. The action deck represents the group's life force.
Right. So we've been manipulating this, but and actually at the start of the game this is bigger. We're just using this for an example. But when you start the game, you have a pile of the blue cards, which are action cards. This is the entire party's life.
Yep. What you do with cards in the action deck, you draw them, you'll discard them. If it's a curse, it has no effect unless it's drawing from the discard deck.
Right.
But we'll get into that in a second. And you also put cards from your hand, or from that deck into your hands at some point. So it's just the deck.
Right. But it's a deck that has a ton of different functions.
Yes.
But one of the biggest things about it is, remember, this is not a game where you can just haphazardly go, oh, hey, I'm going to go look for this item and keep digging through the pile until you find what you need, because you will pay for that.
Yes.
Or if you want to do some kind of action because you're just really, really curious, then you could end up paying for it because you're like, oh, I'm going to take 5 cards just to make sure I pass. Right. Well, that's 5 cards you don't have of life now. So be very careful watching the status of that deck with however you manipulate it, because it'll be all up to you whoever you play with.
Yep. And then another thing we already talked about is when the last card is removed from the action deck, you shuffle the discard and place it face down to form the discard deck. And whenever a curse is drawn from the discard deck, that's game over.
Right.
And then anything discarded gets shuffled back in the discard deck.
So Jeb just described what we showed to you earlier. If for some reason this is empty and all the cards are in here, and you're required to draw a card, for whatever reason, this gets shuffled, shuffle, flipped over, and then you randomly draw from that. But if you, when it's like this and you have to draw from it, if you reveal a curse, game over. And then, again, just to reiterate, once cards come back and make a pile again, this immediately flips back over. Oh, look, there's a curse card. I avoided it.
All right. I've got notes about exploring the continent. You use exploration cards to open up more of the continent. You move to other terrain by using movement actions.
Right there.
And one thing we didn't mention, if you spot a hidden number on any of the tiles, you go through the adventure deck and look for the number that you spotted. And when you pull that card out, you look in the bottom right on the back of the card. I guess.
And it'll have a thumbs up for the card that you're replacing if you've gotten the right card.
Yeah, if you see the thumbs up, then that means you actually found the hidden number.
Yeah, you did it right. One thing that isn't 100% clear in the rules, we are pretty sure that it is the proper way to play, is that you don't, like, the second that you see that hidden number is not necessarily, like, you don't have to do it right at that time.
Right.
You can, like, oh, wait a second, I'm going to do the actions that's available to me right now, just in case that hidden number is going to give me something bad or whatever you could be thinking. So, plus, yeah, I wouldn't say they stick out like a sore thumb either. They're kind of blended in. So you actually might go on a little bit, and then somebody later on might go, hey, wait a second.
They're like staring out into space, and they're like, oh, wait, that's a number.
The only thing that is important about that is that you do have to be on the card to do it.
Yeah.
You can't just be like, oh, hey, nobody's over there, let's just swap that card.
Right.
Or at least, if I remember correctly, that is correct, right?
That would make sense, because if nobody's there, it's like...
how can you see the number or whatever? Well, that's the way we played it. If that's not right, then yell at us. If there's a case where you've built like a gigantic map and you've just totally run out of table room and you either don't want to or it's too difficult to slide the map around without moving it up. What you can do, get everybody on the same space, keep the cards that you want, and then take off the cards and put them into the past that you're not using anymore. Rearrange the table so that you can continue to play.
When we say getting everybody on the same tile, that's not you just pick up the piece.
Yeah,
you
that
literally
means you
have to take actions to get there.
Yes, you can't just move there. So, like, say that the map was off the camera right now, and everybody in our party worked our way back to this card. We could pick up the cards around wherever we needed to be. It probably wouldn't be this tile because we've already explored there, but we'd probably be up on the edge here. We would probably want to keep some of the cards around us just in case.
Yeah.
The key to remember that if you do that, if you pick up cards and these reopen up, you put down new exploration tokens. So, like, if there was a piece of continent here and a piece of continent there, and we decided we need to make room, and we picked those up, we would put new exploration things down based on whatever the number was. So you don't get basically you don't get a freebie if you want to go back and look. You might screw yourself over.
All right, the next section I have is about items. We've already talked about some of this stuff. Finding an item, it'll have a black die icon on it, and it automatically gets added to your inventory. That's when you find it in the adventure deck.
That's when you find an item, not this is crafting an item. Yeah. Sorry, people.
That's fine. Crafting an item, as Mickey said, you look at the crafting action at the top of an item that's in your hand, you perform it. When it's successful, then you place it in your inventory. Upon success, you put the die to the correct number of pips and put it on top.
Which we showed you at length when we built that.
Yes. There is a thing called combining items.
Okay, this is actually one of the trick, if there is such a trick thing that's trickier in the game. So, as you go along and play the game, and you acquire items, depending on the number of people, you only have so many slots. So you might have, you could, if you're solo, you get 4. But most likely you're going to have 3 or 2.
And a quick thing, you look at the satchel card to find out how many slots you have.
Right. So let's assume that we're playing with three people. Then I have, not that. I'm allowed to have 2 stacks of items, and I'm allowed to build those. I'm allowed to combine up to 3 items in that. All right. So what does combining an item mean? Mechanically, all it means is once you've either found an item or crafted an item, you literally take the card and stick it under here.
Yep. And you make sure you can see the effect.
Make sure you can see the effect, right, of what it can do. Now, there's a couple key things to remember. There are keywords on the bottom of the card. You know, when you combine an item, if the item that's being combined, if it matches a keyword, you are allowed to take the number of the die that's being combined and add it to the original die count not to exceed 6. So, for example, this item says vigilance. This item that I have in my hand says vigilance down here. If I took the time to craft this item, I could slide it under here as a combined item because I don't have any more slots available. So the only way I can get this into play is to combine it. I would slide it under here. It had a 1 pip here that would get added to this. So now this stack has 2 uses and everything on that card is available to use now. So this has the hunting action, and then this actually has a skill that I can take to do something on it. But
so whenever he uses any of the skills on the item, he has to reduce the pip by 1.
Right.
But if, for instance, there was another card that had the hunting on it, if he spent 1 pip, he would get all the hunting.
Get all the hunting, that's right. Now, if I didn't have this vigilance card, or say I was saving it for something else, just because a card doesn't have the keyword does not mean it can't be combined. You are still allowed to combine. It just slips under the card and you don't get the bonus of being able to increase the life, basically, of the item that you built.
And as you said, when you do get the bonus to increase, if it ever goes above 6, all you do is just
leave it at 6. Exactly. Is there anything else to note about that? If there's an item card that has a 1-use thing and says discard this, you are allowed to just discard that card. It doesn't affect any of the other things.
It has to say it on the card.
It has to say it on the card. You don't...
Because there is a thing called relinquishing items.
Right.
And you can relinquish an entire item at any time, but you cannot voluntarily deconstruct an item.
Right. So I can't... This is actually a good example. If I do this, it actually says discard this card. So this would come out without affecting the rest of the item if I used it.
You would pay the 1 pip to take the action.
Right.
When you resolve it, you discard that part or that card.
Exactly.
And then, like I just said, when you use an item, you remove a pip to use it, and you get the effects or take the action that's on it. And then there is also giving and swapping items, and the rules for that is the 2 characters must be on the same tile.
Makes sense.
And you have to discard 2 cards from the action deck. So just to swap or give items. You cannot combine when you do this. It's literally just swapping or giving. So, yeah, you kind of take some life to give.
Not exact. I mean, unless somebody just had a fantastic hand and really need to make some new items and they didn't want to get rid of what they have. We haven't come across that situation where it's been necessary yet, but thinking about how the game works, I could see that. Let's say, for instance, just thinking out loud here, let's say Jeb had 2 items, they both had 6 life each. I basically had nothing.
Yeah.
And you had some stuff that really needed to come out on the field. It would be really, really beneficial. We could get rid of the 2 life from the action deck. You could slide one over to me.
Or both of them.
Or both of them, or whatever. Yep. My point is, it would free you up space to build some new stuff that you had. So that it's certainly possible that it might be beneficial to do that so that you don't have to get rid of something that's super, super useful.
Right. In 7th Continent, you're able to save the game kind of whenever you want. The key thing is everybody must be on the same tile for you to be able to save. And when we actually play our playthrough, at the end of that, we're going to show you what saving looks like.
Right.
So this is just going to be a quick explanation of saving.
Yeah, we're going to give you an explanation. I would also say, if you don't care about spoilers at all, and you don't want to watch the playthrough, skim to the end, you can see a complete save action.
Yeah.
I personally think if you don't want spoilers, it still probably wouldn't spoil too much if you really, really want to see it. The cards are out there, and I don't think we're flapping too much about what happened. We're actually saving and not. But that's totally up to you, because it's we'd actually have to deconstruct everything that we've already done to show you. So we're gonna describe it. It should make a lot of sense. And we're going to show you the parts because it's really, really unique, and it's super slick, and it really should make sense. But if you really want to see it, you can go to the end of the playthrough and see it.
Yeah, what saving consists of is everybody's on the same tile, and there isn't an action that's ongoing. So just whenever there's no actions going on and everybody's together, you can just be like, we're going to save. What you do is you discard everything on the board to the past except for the terrain tile that everybody's on. And then you're going to start stacking cards.
Right. So literally, let's say Jeb had those items. Those would stay in front of Jeb. Any cards that I had in my hand or whatever on my side of the board over here would stay. Everybody that was playing would have to be on this tile. And everything that's been created on the board, no matter where it is, except for this title, scooped up and put into the past. Not banished. Make sure it goes into the past. Okay? So that's step 1.
Next thing is the stacking of the cards. So what you're going to do is gather your character card, which is in hand. You're going to gather all the cards in your hand and put that under your character card.
Right. So if I have a hand of cards, if I have a bunch of cards here, this is my hand, this is my character, I just put them like that. That's it.
Then you're going to put any items stacked under those.
So for instance, this has 2 pips left. Jeb would take one of these cards, take the die off, put that on top of it. Notice the 2's at top. When he comes back to play the game, he'll know how many pips he had left. Take another one, set it to 3, take the die off. Boom. Now he can stack those under what he just stacked.
Boop. After that, you're going to find the save card that says action pile, or action deck, and then the one that says discard pile.
So that one says action deck.
And we got discard pile.
And discard pile. That's what's going to go under each of those.
Right.
Whatever's left in your action deck and whatever's left in your discard pile.
And then you stack those. And then you're going to stack the satchel underneath it with all the cards that are under the satchel.
So the satchel has all your clues and anything that you've found so far in the game.
And then at the very bottom is going to be the terrain card that everybody's standing on.
Right. So that's it.
And if it didn't make sense, we didn't explicitly say it, but Mickey has all of he has his character with his hand under it and all the items under that. I have my character with all the hand and the items, and then we're going to stack those on top of each other. So that way in the end, it's just going to be one giant stack.
Right.
So.
And there's a save divider, so you'll know what it is. And then when you want to reset up the game,
it just all falls back. The only thing is the terrain tile that you left off on, you're going to put it there and then put any exploration.
Right, then you'll put new exploration things, so you kind of have to start over a little bit.
A little bit, yeah. And that's everything for saving and resuming a game. Winning and dying, you want to talk about that real quick? The way to win?
The way to win is you have to lift the curses that you've chosen at the beginning of the game. And I say curses plural because you are allowed to pick more than one. Highly recommend that you only start with one to start the game. I mean, we're only starting with one, and we can all already see how long it's going to take to get to the point where we do that, and that's assuming we don't die.
Yep. The rule book has hard and easy modes that is literally just starting the group starts with an extra card in hand, and that card is either going to make things easier or more difficult, or you could play without it, which is just normal mode. When a character is eliminated, they discard their hand and items in their inventory. They return all their state cards that are in their hand. They banish their character cards that are in the action deck or discard pile. And if somebody else has one of their items for some reason, when that item is used up, then that gets banished. So that's just a character being banished. Losing the game is when a curse card is drawn from the discard deck.
Or there are cards that could say, you lose the game or whatever because of something that happened.
Yeah.
We have seen those. We're not going to give them away on what could happen to you, but we have seen the potential.
Yeah.
To die.
So losing is kind of the entire group loses, but right. I guess from reading the rule book, it says that characters can be eliminated, and I don't think we've actually seen that yet.
No, we haven't.
But when in the case somebody gets eliminated, there's a procedure. There's also a procedure for people leaving and joining the game. We won't go too much into that.
We don't need to go into that.
But they have rules that allow people to hop in or hop out when they want to.
Because it is a long game, so if you started with 4 people and you had somebody that just kept canceling and canceling, then you could be like, dude, you can jump in if you ever make it back. We're going to keep playing.
Yeah. And then the last thing I got is something we do at the end of all our videos, which we're not going to talk about at the end of the video, because they actually mentioned in the rule book things that are forgotten, easily forgotten. So they have a list of them, and I'll list them, and Mickey can say any thoughts about them. Placing exploration cards.
In the heat of the moment, it could be very easy to forget to put those around there, and then you're like, did we take that off yet, or did we actually do it, or whatever? So just remember, when you put a terrain tile down, any of these orange markers, look at the Roman numeral, go to the box, pick as many as you need out of that Roman numeral, and put them down. Just try to make that a habit immediately.
Yeah, I agree. If you make it a habit, then you're never going to forget it. Next thing, you can craft items without the resources.
Which we explicitly went over. Don't forget that. Just because you don't have the resource that helps you make it doesn't mean you can't find it. It just means you have to look harder for it, so you get more exhausted.
Another thing is you can only move to connected terrain.
Right. So if there's terrain all the way across here, and then there's, I don't know, a beaver dam or something.
Yeah.
It was blocking.
Too, so.
I did just make that up. So if there's a beaver dam, I have no idea.
Yeah.
And it's blocking the way. That's as far as I can that's as far as I can move without taking an action to either destroy the beaver dam, get over the beaver dam, whatever. It has to be continuous, and if that still doesn't make sense when you play the game, it'll be really, really clear if a card is continuous or not.
I think the one that we ran into even said that it blocked the
it does.
terrain.
It's very very self-evident.
All right. Another thing is when you take an action, you may draw more cards than are required unless there is a lock.
Right. So we went over that too. That's a huge part of the game. You can, most of the time, unless there's a red lock on the action, you can draw pretty much as many cards as you want. So if there's something that you really, really think you need to have, and you want to absolutely guarantee those successes, you can go as high as you want. Jeb mentioned it real quick. There is a chart in the book that gives you percentages of the odds of getting the successes. So
you can consult that.
You can consult that if you want, or you can just go for it.
Yep. The next thing is successes and sevens on the left side of cards are only used for the result step of taking an action.
Right. So this side is only ever used in the game during the reveal section when you take an action. After that, these don't mean anything.
When it's in your hand, doesn't mean
anything.
When it's an item that you crafted,
doesn't mean anything.
Yep. The next thing is only one card can be taken as a result of an action.
Right. So doesn't matter if you draw one card or 10 cards. The active player gets to choose one of those cards. He can keep it for himself, or he can give it to a player that was involved in that action.
Yeah, I guess the thing that there's saying people might misinterpret is like everybody involved in the action.
You're right.
Get one,
it's one card.
Total.
One card. And again, why the manipulating that deck is so important, because if you draw 5 cards and they're all super awesome, you're only keeping one of them.
So you might want to hop in when people do actions too.
Well, sometimes.
Oh yeah. I mean,
sometimes it could be bad. It's not always good.
The final thing for Forgotten Rules,
and we didn't go over this. It's kind of we haven't seen it happen yet, but we'll mention it. It's in the rule book. It's easy to forget.
Like in a side box.
Yeah, it's actually in a side box. I don't know that it happens often, but go ahead and read it, Jeb. If we need to elaborate, we will.
If a group fails in action, so more than the active player, then the active player gets the number 100 card.
Right.
So anytime a group of players fail in action, the active player gets the 100 card.
Which is, we're not going to tell you.
We won't tell you. I think it actually says in the book, the rule book, but we still won't tell you. You have to play it to find it.
Actually, I don't think that's happened to us yet, but it could definitely happen. So anyways, that's basically the mechanics of the game and how you play. We tried to do this the best we could without revealing a whole bunch of stuff. At this point, if you just watched that and you were like, I still don't think I could get through this, go ahead and watch some of the gameplay. We honestly really, if you watched 5-10 minutes worth, you won't destroy the fun of the beginning of the game. You'd have to watch an hour and a half worth of footage to see how far we get.
Yeah.
But you'll definitely get enough to know what you're doing. And at that point, I think you could go back to the rule book, look anything up that you would needed to, because for the most part, the mechanics are pretty simple, and I think we tried to hammer home. If you heard us repeat things multiple times, they were probably things that we did when we played that we were like, oh.
Yeah.
So just try to focus on that, and you guys should be good.
And also the what is it, cheat sheet kind of thing card?
Yeah, your player reference.
Player reference, that's the right word. So helpful because all the symbols actually have small explanations on what they mean. So when playing, I actually reference that a lot. So
Yeah, particularly the action ones. I think they have a more of a, hey, what does that mean? What does that do? The other side is literally like all the actions. I mean, you almost don't need to know what they're. It's more fun if you look it up, because then you'll be like, ah, yeah, that's what I'm doing.
yeah,
You know,
be like me, just make a wild guess.
Yeah,
and then Mickey looks it up and is like, Jeb, you idiot, you said the wrong thing.
Well, actually, in this game, he got a lot of them right. Believe it or not, I don't know why. Most of the time, he's like, it's a head. No, Jeb, that's willpower. In this game, it's probably called a head.
Yeah.
Anyways, so that's about it. Again, if you don't get it, watch a little bit of the gameplay. If you do get it, I think you're going to enjoy this. We are 2 hours into our adventure, I think, Jeb, something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
And we can't wait for it to hit the table again. So anyways, that wraps up the, what is this, mechanics part of the game?
Yep.
That's it.